let's start the session. Firstly, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking out your time this evening and joining us today. My name is Archita, and I am a part of FIAPO. And FIAPO is India's apex animal rights organization. We work with over 180 member organizations and with over 1,000 volunteers spanning across 90 cities and the law, feeding animals. And today we have two eminent panelists with us today, Ms. Anjali Gopalan and Varnika Singh as well, to share a little bit about both our speakers. Ms. Anjali Gopalan is an environmentalist and also a passionate lover of animals. Driven by this very passion and love for animals, she has established an animal sanctuary called All Creatures Great and Small. And it was actually started with the mission to create a very compassionate and gentle environment in a sanctuary for all sick, abandoned, as well as lonely animals. And through this, she also aspires to create a happy forever home for all the permanent residents in the sanctuary, also through their adoption program. She is also the founder and executive director of the very famous the NAS Foundation, and also a board member of the Animal Welfare Board of India. Next, we have Varnika Singh here with us today. Varnika is working in the capacity of the legal manager at FIAPO. She has a vast experience of over 11 years, and she also has a vast storehouse of knowledge in all things legal. She has also done her Masters of Law from the National Law University in Bhopal, and some of her focus areas include litigation, various issues related to legal court petitions as well as legal instruments. I am extremely thankful to both our speakers here for joining us today, and we are really delighted to have you both for the session, and welcome.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
We are happy. Okay, before we move on, I'll just make a few quick announcements before we start the webinar. Please feel free to write all your questions in the Q&A icon you'll find at the bottom of the screen. We will take them all towards the end of the session. And without taking more of everybody's time, we'll start with the session, and I shall be handing over the session to you, Varnika. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Archita, for the introduction, and good evening. So there's a lot of confusion, after the stay on the Maya Chablani case by the Supreme Court about the rights of a feeder to feed a street dog. So I will try my best today to clear the confusion with the help of laws and the guidelines. So I'm taking the opportunity to start with the main issue in hand, which is the Maya Chablani case. And I will start with the facts of the case. I will just share my screen. Yes. So there was a small issue in the case. The plaintiff, who is Maya Chablani, she was agreed because the defendant, who is Radha Mittal, as per Maya Chablani, she was feeding street dogs inside her property, that is outside her house. But as per Radha Mittal, she was feeding the dogs inside the property, but she was not feeding right outside the house of Maya Chablani. So court asked for a settlement, and in the settlement, Radha Mittal, the defendant, she agreed not to feed any stray dogs inside the subject property. The property was A1 136 in the New Delhi, and this settlement was reached with the assistance of counsel's Pragyan Sharma, who was the amicus curiae. Amicus curiae is the friend of the court. He was not appearing on behalf of any of the parties. And Miss Manisha Kataria, who was the counsel of AWBI, the Animal Welfare Board of India. And in the settlement, Radha Mittal, she agreed that a point was made that a feeding point was made, and it was marked on the site plan, and timings were given that she can feed in the morning between 6 to 8 and in the evening between 7 to 10 p.m. So this was the settlement, and these were the fact of the case. After that, this issue was over. So now, court came to know that this issue is keep coming. So in this case only, several councils like for AWBI or the amicus curiae, they just submitted their written submissions. So I will just, for everyone's knowledge, I will share few of the written submissions. So these are not the directions by the court. This is only for the understanding. So do not think that these are the directions given by the court. These are the submissions which were submitted in the court by the lawyers. So one of is that every person has a right to show compassion, love, affection towards animal in any form whatsoever, including feeding of stray dogs. And it is a right guaranteed to every person under the law, and it should be encouraged, and that it is an inherent or natural right of a person to love or show kindness or feed animals, which cannot be restricted. Another thing which was said, that animals also have a right to be treated with compassion, respect, and dignity. And in fact, it is the responsibility of states and authorities and body, that is the local bodies, to include, every citizen to ensure protection of animals against pain and suffering. And then there are 5 international freedoms which were also quoted. These are the freedoms which I will take after, so I am not going to read it here. And then it was said that community dogs, they have the right to food, and citizens have the right to feed community dogs. But in exercising this right, care and caution should be taken to ensure that it does not impinge upon the rights of others or cause any harm or hindrance or harassment to the society. And then some suggestions were made that, in India, there is no dog population managing. There is no census that how many dogs are there. So there should be a census of stray dogs, and campaigns like don't shop and adopt should be encouraged more, which will help in controlling the dog population in the country, which is not as popular in India as yet. And on qualities, it was said that the basic qualities of dogs, whether community, stray, or pedigreed, they are all same. No, they are not different. Loyalty, faithfulness, companionship, guarding. And also that street dog, one of the advantages of street dogs is that they perform the role of community scavengers, and they also control the rodent population in the area. And in order to check the overpopulation of street dogs in the community, it is the responsibility of community to get their street dog population sterilized. And how? Through an NGO engaged in dog sterilization program, which takes place under the animal birth control rules. So all these suggestions were made, and the feeding spots for dogs must be in secluded area of the colony or a back lane, and dog shelters should be made for each community dog in the locality at common cost, so that they don't have to suffer the heat and rain and cold. So these were some of the suggestions which were made. Now comes the directions of the court. What the court actually directed, that what has to be done. So court said that it shall be the duty and responsibility of RWAs or the municipal corporation to include and like police to provide assistance and ensure that there is no hindrance to caregivers or feeders who are feeding the community dogs. And it shall be the responsibility of the SHO who is there at the jurisdiction to ensure that peace and harmony is maintained when a feeder is feeding a dog. So this is the duty of SHO, that he should take care of these things if in case of any quarrel. And then it is the duty and obligation of every resident or municipal corporation, if RWA is not there, only there, to ensure that every community dog in every area has access to food and water in absence of caregivers or community dog feeders in the said area. And the very important point which was made, which is about the Animal Welfare Committee, that AWBI shall ensure that every RWA or municipal corporation, if RWA is not there, every RWA shall have an Animal Welfare Committee, which will be responsible for ensuring the compliances which are given in the PCA Act, and to take care of the harmony and for the feeding. Like Animal Welfare Committee within the RWA will take care of it. Now, so And if there will be any grievance regard to any dogs, this animal welfare committee will first take care of it, and then through a dialogue discussion, if animal welfare committee fails in settling this issue, then it can be brought to the notice of AWBI, and then AW will ensure the further compliance. So this is the major thing in this judgment. Now, what is, and then court also made an implementation committee. There are several members in this implementation committee, like animal husbandry, AWBI, SHO, so that this can be implemented in Delhi. An implementation committee was made. Now what has happened, and everyone is thinking whether they have a right to feed these street dogs is not, because this judgment is stayed by the Supreme Court of India, and it was stayed on 4th of March, this 4th of March. And actually in the order of the Supreme Court, no submissions are made. It is court has just said to notice issued with interim stay. Okay, and the petition is filed by an NGO, which is called the Humane Foundation for People and Animals. But now people are thinking, if there is a stay on this judgment, then they do not have any right to feed animals. No, it is not like that. So the stay is, only on this direction about the animal welfare committee, which court has said. So as of now, as a matter of right, as a matter of that court has directed to say something, we cannot press for it because of the stay. But it does not mean court has said nothing on. So the Maya Chablani case, an implementation committee was made, and so now this Maya Chablani case, it got an interim stay from the Supreme Court, and people are thinking that they do not have any right to feed street dogs. This is not the case at all. The interim stay is only that we cannot ask the RWAs now as a matter of right, as a direction from the court that you have to make the animal welfare committee. This is what it is. But you can still feed street dogs. And why you can feed street dogs? Because before this Maya Chablani judgment, there are many other guidelines, cases and laws which gives you right to feed street dogs. So one of this order is Urvashi Vashisht and others versus Resident Welfare Association. It is dated 24th Feb 2021. In this case also, the petitioners were animal lovers. This is a case of Vasant Kunj, and they filed the case against Resident Welfare Association. So court here also said to come to a settlement. Court never said that do not feed street dogs. So the court again here said that AWBI 2 representatives, they shall hold a meeting with the RWAs at Vasant Kunj, and they should make a feeding point. But just the thing to keep in mind is that the feeding point, it should be where the children are not there, senior citizens or other residents are not there, so there is no hindrance for any other person. So it should be at a bit of secluded area. And once this spot is identified, the petitioner would feed and take care of the street dogs at that particular spot. So this was said in this case, and also the SHO of area concerned shall also be present at that time. So in the Maya Chablani case also, and in this case also, the court is putting a duty. What actually court is not putting, court is just saying, because as it is already police duty to take care of their jurisdiction area, that law and order is maintained. So therefore they are the person who are responsible, and if there is any issue, you should go to the SHO of the area concerned. And then there is one more order. It is of 2009, Citizens for the Welfare and Protection of Animals. It is also of High Court of Delhi. And in this case also, in 2009, it was said that in each colony of Delhi, AWBI should identify in consultation with RWA area SHO and animal welfare organization working in that area the spot sites which in its opinion would be more suitable for the purpose of feeding dogs. The purpose of feeding dogs is to keep them confined to a particular place so as to subject them to sterilization, vaccination, revaccination, as the vaccination does not last more than a year. So, and the order was also given to implement this order. It shall also try to cover as many as colonies it can during that period. So it was in 2009. I think this order was not I think not many people know about it, or in 2009 what happened, but such order was passed in 2009 also. Now, after these court orders comes AWBI guidelines. 26th Feb 2015, there is a guideline of AWBI, which first this guideline is talking about guideline for caregivers. So people who are giving food to street dogs, what they should do. So those who feed street dogs, they are advised to participate in sterilization, yearly vaccination. Why? Because they win the trust of the dog and dog listens to them. That is why. And they are advised not to feed street dogs close to residences, not their own. So they can feed close to their residence, but not their own, because we all know what happens after that fight starts. And that they avoid feeding immediately adjacent to areas in which children play or people walk, or otherwise area which is crowded. Feeding must not be done in manner that contributes to littering or dirting any feeding site. They are advised to clean feeding sites after feeding is over, and they are also advised for sterilization and vaccination of dog, that they should keep the records updated and accessible. Then in the same guideline, which is 26/12/15, these guidelines are for caregivers. In the same guidelines, there are guidelines for street dogs, which says that which says what should not be done, like beating and driving away of street dogs is not allowed. As per ABC rules, they cannot be relocated. There is no law that prohibits feeding street animals. So this is very important, so that you can feed animals, no one can stop you. Citizens, and in fact citizens who are feeding, they are just fulfilling their constitutional duty. And people who are interfering or harassing, they are actually doing an act of criminal intimidation, that is threatening. And also it says a very beautiful line: any aggression or hostility that dogs may be subjected to may render them aggressive and hostile to humans. So as a result, they may then resort to snapping. So why does a dog snap, or why does a dog bite? It's because you yourself are showing hostility towards the dog. So this is the main reason, and we should understand it, and we should also should be trained, I think, to how to behave with a street dog. So in this situation, human aggressors shall be the only ones to blame. Then there is an advisory of AWBI, which they have sent to all the chief ministers of all these states and union territories. This date is 12 July 2018. And in this advisory, AWBI asked to take action for rescue and rehabilitation of stray animals. And they have said here that responsibility of local bodies, that it is the responsibility of local bodies to provide shelter, water, sufficient food, medical facilities to stray animals. And if they are not doing so, then it is the violation of Section 3 of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. I will also read the Section 3 for you. So Section 3 of the PC Act says that it shall be the duty of every person having the care or charge of animal to take all reasonable measures to ensure the well-being of such animal and to prove the infliction upon such animal of unnecessary pain or suffering. So in the case of street animal, who is in the charge of that animal? Either the person who is taking care of it, or otherwise municipal department, because they are the authority of government. That is why it is coming under Section 3. Now coming to our Constitution of India. So under Article 48A DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy, it gives duty to the state to protect and make all endeavors to safeguard the forests and wildlife. Then duties of citizens of India Article 51A, to value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture. So in this rich heritage, flora and fauna also comes. So dogs, street dogs are parts of our rich heritage. Then Article 51AG, it says to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, wildlife, and to have compassion for living creature. And here to have compassion for living creature, it has been given a wide meaning, and it lays down the duty of every citizen to show kindness and love towards such non-vocal beings. Then Article 51AH, it is about to develop the scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform. So the word to look here is humanism. So these are DPSP and fundamental duties. So DPSP and fundamental duties are the moral obligations of a citizen and state to whatever is this given in the constitution, to to take it as your duty to do it. This is your moral obligation. This is not your legal obligation. This is your constitutional morality. So so you cannot say, okay, if you are not doing this duty, if you are not showing humanism, you are doing an offense. No, you are not going as per the constitution of the country. Morally you are not right. And but then there is fundamental right, which is always enforceable in the court. If there is infringement of fundamental rights, then you can go to court. And under Article 21, earlier there was no such interpretation of Article 21. Article 21 gives right to life. What does it say? Right to life states that no person shall be deprived his life or personal liberty. What does it say? No person. There is they are not talking about animals, but now it has been interpreted, and Article 21 also include right of animals. The sad article not only protects life of human beings but also protect the life of animals. But how? So it happened in the Nagaraja case in 2014. It is also called the Jallikattu case. So in this case, it was observed by the honorable judge that every species has a right to life and security, subject to the law of land, which includes depriving its life out of human necessity. So Article 21, while safeguarding the right of humans, protects life, and the word life has been given an expanded definition. And any disturbance from the basic environment, which includes all forms of life, including animal life, which are necessary for human life, fall within the meaning of Article 21. So if if it's now animals have right to life, if street dogs have right to life, then obviously they will eat food. Then obviously they have right to food, and in constitution it is your duty to feed them. It is the duty of state to take care of them. So you have right. The Supreme Court judgment is saying you have right. In fact, right to get food, shelter is also a guaranteed right under section 3 and 11 of the PCA.
Varnika, sorry to cut you here. We can't see the screen sharing. Like your screen is not visible. So can you reshare, please?
Yes, I will just reshare. Is it visible now?
Yes, thank you.
So, yeah. So section 3, I had just read out from the PCA Act. And what is section 11? Section 11 are the offenses which is given in the PCA Act, that you cannot kick a dog, you cannot kill them, you have to give them food, you cannot keep them confined to a place. So that is what is section 11. So right to dignity and fair treatment is therefore not confined to human beings alone, but to animals as well. And last point, that in this judgment, there is WHO, World Health Organization of Animal Health. In short, it is called OIE. So India is also a member of this. And OIE recognize 5 freedoms for animal. So these are the 5 freedoms of any animal internationally: freedom from hunger, thirst, and malnutrition, freedom from fear and distress, from physical thermal discomfort, freedom from pain, injury, and disease, and freedom to express normal patterns of behavior. So these 5 freedoms were also recognized in this judgment. And it is kind of, this judgment is, kind of a Magna Carta for animals. So in the end, I would just like to say that just because the Maya Chablani judgment is state, do not think that your right to feed animals or animals' right to life has gone. No, it's only that you cannot press RWAs to make animal welfare committee as of now. And after 4th of March, no date, it was the matter in Supreme Court through which this judgment got stayed, Delhi High Court was. It has been only listed one on 4th of March. And after that, it has not been listed. It was about to be listed on 18th, but it did not. It got deleted from the list. And so let's see in the next hearing what happens, and let's be positive. So this was about right of street dogs to feed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Varnika. So, for enlightening us on this case, I would request Anjali Gopalan ma'am to take forward this session. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot. Varnika, that was very helpful because I think it set the legal framework of what's happening. So now let's look at the practical aspects, because I think what happened post this judgment was the sheer glee and excitement that RWAs and people who were sick and tired of dogs in their colonies, their gleeful response and their wonderful belief in the fact that that feeders were not allowed to feed animals anymore. And that's what did the rounds. Everyone started believing that to be true. And clearly that's not right, because all that happened was this judgment stayed. All that was stayed was this judgment, right? Asking the setting up of the animal welfare committees. But let me just share with you what was really interesting is the moment the judgment came out, an animal welfare committee was put into place. And a pilot project was put into place. And that was, with the amicus curiae, with the committees that were with the lawyers who were involved with this judgment and all of that, and AWBI, we actually set up a committee along with the animal husbandry department, and started a pilot project with one colony in Delhi, which was Sake. And it was really interesting to see that when we set up this committee, we actually got a good response, right? And then everything came to a halt the moment a stay was pronounced. However, I think what we need to understand is there is a flip side to this. One is what the law says and how feeders can protect themselves within the framework of this law. The other is the reality of what is happening, because as a board member of the Animal Welfare Board of India, I spend hours and most of my time trying to deal with issues that are coming up with RWA, between RWA and feeders. So I think we need to look at the flip side, because we have to find a way to deal with this. It's becoming impossible. There are cases of violence. We know many feeders who are being beaten up, who are being intimidated. RWAs are just violating every right you can think of, right? Unfortunately, there are issues which are taking place which we don't know how to deal with. For example, there are biting dogs, right? And the way feeding happens, most feeding is not happening where feeding points have been identified. And the AWBI guidelines are very clear on this, that you have to set up feeding points and you have to feed only at those feeding points. And this is something that is not being done. And part of it, of course, is the resistance from RWAs, but also from feeders. Very often, the hardest time I have is convincing feeders to feed on feeding points, right? So I think as people who want to ensure that community dogs are taken care of, it's very critical that we follow the rules. One is you must have feeding points. Feeding points have to be identified through a process of consensus with the buy-in of the RWA, the local police thana guy, the SHO or whoever he assigns, a member of the AWBI, and feeders. All these have to reach a consensus. Unfortunately, one of the things that are there in the guidelines is they say that you cannot feed where there is too much of movement. Now, in some colonies, it's very difficult to find places where there isn't too much movement. So how do we reach a consensus? These are issues that we have to constantly work on. We are also finding, as someone who is with AWBI, but also as someone who runs a shelter, we are finding that a lot of feeders relocate. They will pick up dogs and move them to shelters. They will pick up dogs and move them to some other place because they think the dogs are not being taken care of in one place. So I think these are issues that all of us need to be aware of, and to understand that we also we are also part of the problem. If we want to be part of the solution, we have to understand that we are part of the problem. So somehow I think there are many issues which are coming up. Going back to biting dogs, one big issue. And again, what the rules say, or even what the AWBI guidelines say, is that if there is a biting dog, it should be moved out of that area and kept under observation in an animal welfare organization, and then brought back after observation if it is found not to be a biting dog. Unfortunately, we are finding a number of cases where many feeders are being forced to put animals into AWAs, where they then have to cough up a lot of money for keeping those animals there. And RWAs are not stepping in to help out on that process. So there are many issues which are coming up, which I think we have to start figuring out a way to deal with, because feeding is just one aspect of it. But along with feeding, we're seeing a lot of other issues coming up. And yes, the other big issue is how does one ensure that the sterilization happens, the vaccination happens. I know there has been an app called the Stray Buddy app, which has been developed, which is actually a very good app, which allows you to map the place where dogs are. You take a picture of the dog, you put information on the dog, so everybody has access to that in a community. So that way, this fear, because one of the biggest fears people have is that if they get bitten, is the dog vaccinated or not? There is a fear of rabies, and we have to acknowledge that most people in our country who die from rabies are young children, because they're the ones who are running and they're the ones who dogs are chasing and dogs are biting. So if we don't acknowledge this fear, we are actually creating more resistance from people. So we have to ensure that they have access to information. So this app helps you do that. It's just an example of what can work. And I think we saw this happen. It was working very well in the Saket pilot project. Unfortunately, because there's been a full stop to that whole process, we've not been able to take it forward. But I think it's time for us to realize that this whole process, we have to be able to engage with people. We have to engage with people who are very resistant to the way we think. We have to engage with people who are really scared of animals. We have to engage with people who hate animals. So if we don't do that, I don't think we're going to be able to resolve any of our problems. So I'm actually going to stop here, because I would rather we took questions to be able to try and figure out a way to move forward, because right now I know that one of my biggest problems is how to keep this, how to move forward and deal with these issues given the really hostile environment that is existing in our country today. Thanks.
Yes, good evening, everyone. So, ma'am, I'm Jagriti Kaushik, and I'll take over from Archita as her network is not working due to heavy rains. So, thank you for taking us through the details of this case around feeding animals. It surely gave us an enhanced clarity on our rights and the existing laws which we have in our country. We have received a few questions from our members, so I'll be reading them for you. Are there any laws for other animals too, or only for dogs?
So there are laws for all the animals, not only dogs. So the PC Act includes all the animals, that is fish also. Okay, but yeah, you can say there's a difference between wild animals and the companion animals. So for wild animals, there is a separate law, which is Wildlife Protection Act. But the all other animals, dogs, cat, horse, fish, bird, they will come under Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act.
Okay, thank you. Anjali ma'am, if you want to say something.
No, I'm just saying, yes, apparently there are laws for all animals, but depending on who you are talking to, for example, I know in today's climate, talking about, I think when we talk about most issues, what comes up invariably is cows. So that's something that is an issue. So if you are willing to talk about cows and look at rights of cows and what's happening with cows, the environment may be a bit more receptive. But having said that, I know from my own experience, what we are seeing happening with cows is awful. So it's not like it's any better for them. But yes, you have laws for every animal. And when you look at the guidelines that the Animal Welfare Board of India puts out, they put it out for all animals, except wildlife, because wildlife is a separate issue. The Animal Welfare Board of India does not deal with wildlife, but it deals with all other animals. So yes, whether those laws are strictly followed or not, that's another issue of what happens in reality. But I think as people working with animals, all of us need to be aware of those laws. And I think Varnika regularly puts out updates, which are very good, on what is happening in the courts, what's happening in our legal environment. FIAPO regularly puts out updates. So it's really helpful to keep track of that, because she talks about everything that is happening in the courts around animal issues. So this is something all of us need to be aware of and ensure that we download it and keep it for ourselves.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Varnika. How do we deal with people in colonies which don't have a proper RWA or where people are not even that educated to understand the laws? They are usually not willing to listen to facts or guidelines.
Yeah, it's an issue. I mean, that's what I'm talking about, that it's very difficult. So often what happens is someone from it, one of the ways to deal with it is to find someone who can become a mediator, right? And I see AWBI's role there as being very strong. Unfortunately, AWBI is very limited in manpower. Also, please understand it's only a statutory body. So it can only give guidelines, but it can be that mediator. So please reach out and use the AWBI for that purpose. But let me tell you, it's not easy, but you have to be able to find a way to engage with people, because I find very often the clash is around not being able to to be able to figure out via media, to be able to convince people, to be able to engage with them. We haven't found the mechanism to be able to do that without alienating, because people are scared, people are worried, and very often people who are taking care of animals bear the brunt of the pushback, bear the brunt of the violence. But we have to be able to get past that and be able to engage, because if we don't do that, unfortunately, I mean, listen, every second day, we get cases of people being beaten up because they're feeding. I mean, violence, like physically being beaten up. And I find my experiences, it's either young women or single women or older single women who are feeders, often more so than men. And they are easy targets. So I think we have to be able to find a way to engage with people and convince them. There's no other way. What are you going to do otherwise? It's not easy. I also think you have to find a mechanism to be able to get protection, which means really getting to know the local Thana guys, which is horrifying, but it's true. At least be engaged with them. Please, otherwise, not protecting yourselves is an issue.
Thank you, ma'am. So there is another question. Is there any legal intervention in this case? My neighbors keep a small dog constantly tied up in the veranda. The dog barks 24/7 due to distress, and they yell and sometimes even hit the dog with some tool. What can I do legally to ensure the safety of the dog?
Oh, that's a difficult one. But I think the first thing you have to do is actually try and engage with these people. I go back to the difficult part, right? But one of the ways to do it is to actually talk to them and make them understand that what they're doing is creating stress, not only for the animal, but for all people around them. Suppose they don't listen. Your next step is a police complaint. You have to do a police complaint. And then, if still there is no response, you escalate it and try and get people who are involved in rescues involved in this process. Let someone else come and talk with these people. Let them talk with the police. Let them go with the police to these people. Because the only way is negotiation, especially in this, because my fear is when you start escalating it, whether the animal will be violated even more. You know, can they take their anger out more on this poor animal that is tied and left tied? So, but there's a process. First, try and engage with them. If you can't, get the police involved, and then get some rescue organization to come into the picture.
Yes. So are there any laws to prevent people from stealing or taking away newly born puppies from their mothers?
Stealing?
Yeah. So like
Relocating.
taking away puppies from their mothers.
Yeah, there is. Ma'am, you want to go?
No. Please talk about the legal aspect.
Okay. So see, for stealing, here in India, the pets and your puppies, you know, they are still your property. So they are not your dogs. If you have a pet, it's your property. So it will come under IPC, Chori ka section, theft, and you can file the FIR for theft of your puppy. So because
Varnika, I think here, if I'm not mistaken, when whoever's asked this question, correct me if I'm wrong, do you mean that is it in the context of a street dog? So suppose there's a street dog and it's given birth to puppies, and someone removes those puppies and throws them somewhere. It happens a lot. RWAs are doing this constantly.
I think the question, He said
This
pet, I
question
think,
is
no?
this question is a little different. It means like, for example, a mother has given some babies and the mother is alive, but some people take those babies and raise them for adoptions. Their mother is alive, she needs them, and they needs the mother as well. But what can be done in this case?
Are
Is
you
this
talking about
illegal?
relocation? Because listen,
Yeah, this
you're
yeah.
talking about relocation and you're talking about street dogs, I'm assuming, because no one is going to go into someone's house and remove those puppies, right?
Yeah,
You're
street
talking about
dogs.
street dogs. Yeah, and really, that's what I mean. That do-gooder animal lovers, and I hate this language of animal haters and lovers, but those who take care of dogs, this is relocation. Please understand that. What you are doing when you remove a puppy from its mother is relocation. Whether you're taking it to look after it and bring it up and then get it adopted, please understand that first of all, the puppies should be with the mother at least for 2.5 to 3 months. Okay? So what you are doing is exactly what the others are doing, which is relocating. And that is against the law. So you cannot remove pups from their mothers.
Okay, and what in case of what should be done in the case of pets?
In what way?
So if a pet they used to breed, and if they used to sell their small puppies, what should be done in this case?
Well, the problem here is we have laws around breeding. You have AWBI guidelines around breeding. Unfortunately, there's a huge nexus between vets and breeders. So what are we seeing? The reality is that many puppies who are barely 4 weeks old or 5 weeks old are sold, which is why many of them die of all kinds of infections and die very early or grow up very weak. And which is why education becomes a key component of the work we do. One is getting people to know what it means when a pup is taken away from its mother before it is 2 to 3 months old. Secondly, we really have to work with veterinarians so that they stop selling pups, because they are the ones who recommend breeders. Unfortunately, there are no laws around this. So it's all about education. Also, if these breeders, one way to get at the breeders is if they are not following the guidelines that are laid down in the pet breeding, in the dog breeding guidelines, there is a way to get at them. But most of them are goons. It's very difficult to get at them. Most breeders, it's not like it's a streamlined process, right? Every jhuggi in Delhi, I know, is an illegal dog breeding ground. So it's very difficult because you have everyone handing glove with each other, whether it's the cops, the breeders, the vets. So it's very difficult to work on this issue. And I'm not sure I know what to do about it, because this is something that we are constantly trying to figure out what to do with, and there are no laws which we have been able to really work with.
So I will just like to add that actually these breeding rules which are there, they give the whole procedure that how the breeding should be done. Breeders have to be registered, they have to take license from the local bodies, municipalities, and they also have to be registered with AWBI, and only then they can start this breeding thing. So if someone has come across that a breeding is going on, and if they want to check, so they maybe send a letter representation to AWBI ki whether such and such breeder is registered with you, and they would have to go to municipality whether have they taken any license. It's a very difficult job, so it's just like going
But
around.
also what happens, I've been involved in this again. I've gone to a breeder where they said, "हम breeding तो नहीं करते, ये हमारा pet dog है." So it's not like, this is a business. So it was really difficult. And a lot of these people were living in the servant quarters of government employees. So
Yes.
it's not easy,
It's very difficult to rescue from them, and such a case.
very difficult, very difficult. So the laws are there. The problem is the implementation.
Implementation.
Like every law in this country, it doesn't matter whether it's animals or humans, right?
So there is a very good question. If one wants to file an FIR, what are some pointers that can ensure to make the case stronger?
See, the pointers are you should know the law. You should know the facts. You should know the law, because facts obviously you put there, and the law you should be because there is only for animals this PC Act Section 11 is there, because if you are when you're going to police, even police doesn't know what is the animals law. Police don't know anything about animal laws. So if you know it, it will be easier. You can tell police that this has to be done, this section has to be put, isme aise hota hai. We in such cases, it's not like human murder where police knows what to do. Here we should know first, what I think. And don't go alone. Always go in group, and if possible take a lawyer with you. Even if 1 year pass out or something, just take a lawyer with you. It makes an impact. And know the law first, and tell them in PCA Act under this section it has happened, and this is this offense, and this much, though law is not stringent, or it only comes up to fine. But yeah, but for FIR, know the facts and know the law, and try to build pressure.
Okay. What can the person do if the police refuses to file an FIR? What could be the next step?
So before this, I want to tell that under Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, actually the FIR can only be registered in cognizable cases. Now the cognizable cases are those cases majorly which are more serious, like punishment in them is generally above 3 years. And in PCA Act under Section 11, there are several clauses, F to G, and only 3 clauses are cognizable, and all other clauses are non-cognizable. So actually, FIR cannot be registered in those clauses. But in cognizable cases, if FIR is not registered, so first of all, police cannot refuse. There is a judgment that police has to register the FIR, but they don't, because people don't know about this. First step, you can tell ki, Mr. Police, you are obliged to file the FIR, and there is a judgment, you cannot refuse. Even then, if they are refusing, then the other way is to go under Section 156 clause 3 of Criminal Procedure Code. So this is the procedure which is followed when a police refuses to register the FIR. You directly go to the magistrate under Section 156 clause 3, and you tell magistrate that this police is not registering the FIR, and then magistrate tell police to register the FIR. So this is what happens. But in PCA Act, generally, I'm just telling that most of the clauses are non-cognizable, and therefore we put IPC ka 422, 428 and 429. We always add that so that the FIR gets registered, because those are cognizable offenses.
And also, I think sometimes it's good to look at it from a different lens, especially if, as a woman, this is just something that I do, is I would use that card of being a woman and being intimidated or being fearing for my life. I would use that argument also to get an FIR registered. Or at least get a complaint. Sometimes they won't even take a complaint from you, right? It's not easy, by the way. We've been dealing with a case in just as an example, we've been dealing with a horrible AOA person called Joginder Singh in Noida, where the secretary of AWBI had gone and the police did not register an FIR. We are having a government servant going, a senior bureaucrat going and asking for an FIR to be registered, and they did not do. So it's not easy. So I just think before we take that extreme step, we have to try and negotiate and engage and get things resolved.
Yes, definitely. Even I would say that. I go that.
Mm.
That I can see procedures are there, in-law
Yeah.
procedures are there, but to follow them, to get them
Very
implemented,
difficult.
very
Very
difficult.
difficult.
So it is
And
always,
especially the moment you say animal, no, everyone, क्या है, सिर्फ जानवर ही तो है kind of attitude, you know.
So next question is, people move stray dog puppies from their mother, often in the name of taking care of the puppies.
Yeah.
It causes a lot of distress in the for the mother and the puppies. Some groups do this in order to gain funds as well. What can be done to stop this?
Well, that's a difficult one. What can you do? The problem, which is what I'm saying, we are part, if we want to be, we are part of the problem. It's not like we are only part of the solution. We so-called people who care for animals are part of the problem. And unless we understand the consequence of our behavior, we are not going to be able to solve any of these issues, because there are look, if there's a street dog who has given puppies and you remove those street dogs, no one is going to care. Who are you going to go to? Who is going to listen to you? So you have to understand the consequences of what happens to those puppies, and that you're not doing a great act by doing what you're doing. So somehow I feel those of us who are working with animals also need a certain level of education and understanding. We have to be trained to start looking at these issues with a lens that we understand what the consequences of our actions are.
I think the background work is needed very much, like the training and these things are needed. Change of mindset is needed for such things that they don't have. So long way.
Yes. So someone anonymously comes and leave the complete litter and leave them. The existing dogs bite them to death. What can we do if someone comes and leave the puppies like that?
Nothing. Number one, it's anonymous, so you don't know who's done it, right? So who are you going to fight against? We run a shelter, ACGS runs a shelter in the middle of nowhere. We thought that we are very safe, no, nothing like poor Friendicos and all these organizations have to constantly deal with animals being left at their doorstep. You'll be surprised, in the middle of nowhere, we have villagers constantly throwing pups over the wall. What do? We can't do anything. So we end up taking care of them. That's what we do. So there are no answers to any of these questions, because unfortunately, this is the reality that all of us are dealing with. And unfortunately, there's very little we can do about it.
Right. So what to do if police is against the feeders? This has been my experience so far. So one of the attendees is writing this in the chat box.
Yeah.
I think this case is for the training of the police officials. If police is against, politely we have to tell the police, listen, this is the constitutional duty. Like we have to actually enlighten the policeman. And if he can, if he is enlightened, then well and good. Otherwise, I don't know what should be done, ma'am.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult one. But I still go back to saying that, look, all of us need to learn to engage with people. And we have to be able to communicate with people in a way that is not threatening. Because very often, when I go to the cops with an issue because someone, not that I have to deal with, because someone is in trouble, they'll say, Madam, आप ऐसे बात कर सकते हो तो वो क्यों नहीं ऐसे बात कर सकती हैं? So it's, I think somewhere we have to understand that when people, we have to develop that skill. Unfortunately, it's true, it comes back to us, those who are taking care of these animals, because we are seen as the enemy. So please try and engage. I can't think, because this is just a practical, you're most probably thinking in your head, oh, that's very easy for you to say. But the point is, there is no other recourse. We have to learn how to engage with people. Without that, we are not going to be able to resolve anything. Whether it is the police, whether it is various other authorities, whether it is RWAs, AOAs, whoever. And there are going to be times when we are not going to be able. Now, suddenly all RWAs are constantly saying, okay, do the feeding outside the colony. We don't want dogs inside our colony. It's getting harder and harder. And there are some colonies where really there is no space. You know, everywhere you go, there are children running around, people walking, older people walking. So where do you find these feeding spots? So I'm just saying practically, it's going to get even more difficult now for all of us. And therefore, learning to engage becomes critical.
There is one question sent to me directly. What are the areas to feed the dog, maintaining and cleanliness?
Listen, there are what AWBI guidelines are very clear on this, that you have to identify an area which is not trafficked, where not many people are going up and down, number one. Number two, you have to clean up after feeding. Clean up that area where you're feeding the dogs. Thirdly, everyone should feed at the feeding spots. So what happens sometimes when one is trying to intervene, I find invariably people will feed wherever. People who are not really feeders, but who are living in the colony will throw rotis from the 10th floor to the ground floor, right? So it's also educating people on not to do this. But the AWBI guidelines are very clear that it has to be in a place which is not trafficked, and you have to clean up after the dogs, after feeding them.
So here comes the last question in the Q&A box. What extent of support can one expect from the municipal corporation when it comes to getting stray animals sterilized? It is often the known fact that municipal corporation runs very inhumane kind of sterilization programs. And for the same reason, I have gotten a lot of my street animals sterilized on my own expense, but it is becoming really difficult now. Please suggest if municipal corporation are really are legally bound by any guidelines to conduct sterilization programs while ensuring the welfare of the animals.
Yes, municipal corporations are supposed to ensure sterilization of dogs, and the way it's done is through animal welfare organizations who are mandated to provide sterilization services, sterilization vaccination services. Now, the way it is that these organizations, now the rules have changed. Anyone who wants to do, there is a tender that is put out, and NGOs or even doctors will bid for those tenders, and then they have to be registered with the AWBI, and they have to get registration for the animal birth control program. So even if they are a registered organization with AWBI, if they want to run an ABC unit, they have to get clearance from the Animal Welfare Board of India. And unfortunately, this everywhere. It's not working in the way that it should. But this is what they're supposed to do. The problem is in the implementation again. However, now I know that because I am on that ABC committee, I know that we get NGOs have to send in their applications to us, and we go through a whole process of figuring out whether they are eligible to do the ABC, to run the ABC program or not. But let me tell you, it varies from municipal corporation to municipal corporation. from city to city. In rural areas, there's nothing happening. So it's a very mixed bag right now.
Ma'am, I wanted a clarification on this. So the animal welfare organization has to be registered with AWBI. So once the tender is floated and the tender is given to AWA, so after that the ABC registration is needed, or they have to register for ABC registration before
Well,
the
that's a slightly gray area. But if they want to do an ABC program, they have to have certain things in place. So they have to have all the, the equipment, the place, the physical place is supposed to be given by the corporation. But the animal welfare organization should be able to provide the veterinary doctors, the equipment, the catchers, all of that, right? And only then will they be given the permission, to run that unit.
and then they have to get registered as the ABC
For ABC.
for
So whether they are registered with AWBI or not, suppose they're already registered with AWBI, it doesn't matter. They have to get a separate registration for the ABC unit.
I think in 2000 lately this development has.
Yeah, this is very new. This has just happened recently.
So with this, we are at the end of our session. And thank you everyone for sharing the questions and joining us. I extend my sincere gratitude to everyone who has joined us today. And thank you to our speakers and all the members. Have a good weekend.
Thanks a lot. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you. Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.